Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
All right, welcome back to the Stoa, another session in our Unsuccess Symposium. Let us get successful so we can stop giving a shit about getting successful. And today, I'm very excited about the guest, Sebastian Marshall. I've been trying to get Sebastian to the Stoa since the Stoa really started. I've been an admirer and follower of his work, both his writings and his I would say platform modality on productivity called ultra working. And for those of you who ever did a Stoic hustle here, it was somewhat inspired by that. And I've plugged in with his, I think it was called Work Gyms, and it works. So happy to have him here. And so Sebastian, he's like a super mind on all this productivity stuff. And then he's looked at the schedule of what we have in store today, and he's found that sweet spot that is going to provide something that I think is quite original. And he's going to discuss his own methodologies of, I think, productivity success, which he'll frame a little better than I just did. So that being said, Sebastian, I'm going to hand it to Sebastian in a moment. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat anytime. When it comes to that portion, I'll call on you, unmute yourself. If you don't want to be on YouTube, I'll read that on your behalf. So I'll give Sebastian co-host access and take him in right now. Welcome to the Stoa, my friend.
Hey, thank you, Peter. I'm excited. I think this is a wonderful project. I like the mix of, practical, having your life better alongside kind of classical philosophy, going back to the fundamentals of thought and what we can learn across a lot of smart people doing things for a couple of thousand years. So, whenever there's kind of a philosophical context and we're going back to sitting on the porch, it makes me kind of take it seriously. So I've taken this seriously, and I've prepared something that we can kind of move through as you like, Peter. So you could jump in and we could discuss the principles behind something as you like. But I'm going to show you folks some stuff that's public stuff that I've done that I did to build up my own personal effectiveness, but I'm only going to go kind of quickly through that. I'll also show you some behind the scenes. Hey, here's how I run some systems and some team stuff. So I always like to give people context as to what we're doing. This will be kind of an intermediate to advanced talk because, you have David Allen, who's like kind of like the godfather of kind of like taking a rational approach to work. Earlier, you got Malcolm Ocean. Earlier, I got to meet Malcolm at an event that we did at a university some years ago, back when I was in the nonprofit world. He's a great guy. He'll talk about goal setting and such. You have some of the theories of motivation from peers. So I kind of looked at what there is, and what I want to come in is an intermediate to advanced level. And I'll give you a quote, and then I'll explain kind of where I think this slots in, who I think is going to be most relevant for. So there's a quote. It's attributed to a lot of different people, and I'll give you a military metaphor first, and then I'll give you a computer programming, computer science metaphor second. Hopefully one of the two works. If you're into something other than that, I don't know, maybe I don't have anything for you. If I want to throw out a philosophy thing, so this was called the ultra working ethos. Might be more like the ultra working logos. If harkening back to rhetoric. Maybe we're getting more logos. There's be some ethos too, but we're gonna be logos heavy. So there's a quote in the military world that I think is really interesting, and it's attributed to different people. There's different variants of it, but it says amateurs talk strategy and tactics, professionals talk doctrine and logistics. Amateurs talk strategy and tactics, professionals talk doctrine and logistics. So when you look at classical history, I'm into like Thucydides and stuff like that. I think it's cool. It's like, oh, the Greeks got really bold and they went and they rolled up the Persians or whatever. But actually, like, the Persians had a ton of guys. They just couldn't resupply them because the supply routes were really hard. So they just left. So like the idea that the Greeks just beat the heck out of the Persians so bad that the Persians couldn't do anything is not true. The Persians weren't able to win very quickly, and the Greeks won logistically, right? So when you think about that, right, people are into oh, okay, the Battle of Marathon, they weren't fully out of the ocean, it's just, or whatever, right? But they don't think about, hey, what were the Persian supply chains like? It's boring. It's not the most interesting. Battles are cool and sexy and fun. And getting food to your thousands of soldiers and their horses and stuff, and getting the horses over the land or the boats over the water is not cool and sexy for most people. But, that's kind of how it goes. So this talk is at an intermediate level. As an intermediate level, right? So people that are quite advanced, in any sort of academia where they're, you know, maybe if you're a tenured professor somewhere and you've got research assistants and you know, postgrads and graduate students and stuff, you've probably implicitly learned all this stuff, even if you might not know some of the words, that might be interesting for you to get the words. Same if you're doing something in business or putting together any communities, you probably know a lot of this stuff already, though I might give you some interesting words and ways to think about it. If you're on a very fundamental level, if you're just getting started out, hey, that's cool. We all start somewhere. I was clueless longer than most people. I was clueless into my mid-20s. Maybe my late 20s, I started to get it. I'm in my mid-30s now. So hey, if you're like, you know, 18, 19, 20, 21, or you're a late bloomer like myself, some of these things might not apply because you got to get your personal effectiveness dialed in to be able to do some of this stuff because it builds on that. And I think people here probably got a bunch of great stuff on that earlier today from David and Malcolm and peers and such. So I'm doing the intermediate stuff of like, okay, once we got kind of like some of the basics running, how do we make it work? And that's the doctrine and logistics side of thing, right? So I'm going to be focused on operations of like kind of how we make big-ish things happen. And logistics are one part of operations, and on a personal level as well as on a kind of like on a team level. If you want to do stuff with other people, you want to do bigger things, right? So to make it really brief, I would say that people do things for reasons in a like top level that are as hard to name, surprisingly hard. You could say based on their moral sentiments, their philosophy, their doctrine. You could use the word religion, which typically implies organized religion. Sometimes use the Latin word religio, which refers to like a personal religion, your personal beliefs, whatever. You have some things you think matter in the world, so you do them. You pick a strategy of like, okay, how are we going to actualize that, right? If you want to like help people, you could become a medical doctor, you become a social worker, you know, you could be involved in your community. And there's different things you could do. There's different kind of big picture strategies. Let's say you became an MD. There's tactics like, okay, well, I'm going to need to pass the organic chemistry class. I'm going to need to get a med school application in. I might want to tour some campuses, right? And so on and so forth. So those are tactics. What is operations? It's hard to define. My definition of operations is the coordination of all the tactics over time, right? So it's the ability to coordinate a bunch of actions that work locally really well, and just to get them all happening. Because, you know, if you have a group of dudes trying to invade Greece, you need to get everybody on the same page, and there needs to be food and supplies and stuff. So it's coordinating all the tactics, all the moving pieces. And I feel like this is something that once people get a good personal effectiveness, this is then the barrier to doing bigger things. Management's gotten a bad reputation. It's kind of like treated as a dirty word these days. I think it used to try to be this. Now I don't know what it is. I don't know if anybody's doing a good job at it anymore. But in general, there's like a coordination function that as an individual, you'll do some in your life, and with groups, you definitely need to do this to get everybody on the same page and get things done. So I kind of want to show how one turns into the other and how to build some skill. And I'm doing that not in a theoretical way, but I'll just show you what I did, right? So that's the gist of it. I want to give you one quote before getting started. And then Peter, we could riff a little before we get started. I'll do some demos. But this is from the book Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs, which was kind of one of the kind of godfather texts in computer science. I believe it came out of MIT originally. And he was explaining this book about programming where he uses, you know, examples and stuff. And he's talking about it, but he's trying to push people to not get caught up in the examples or the syntax. He says, our goal in learning about computer programming, structure, interpretation of computer programming, our goal is that students who complete this subject should have a good feel for the elements of style and the aesthetics of programming. They should have command of the major techniques for controlling complexity in a large system. They should be capable of reading a 50-page long program if it is written in an exemplary style. They should know what not to read and what they need not understand at the moment. They should feel secure about modifying a program, retaining the spirit and style of the original author. Okay, fair enough. They're going to learn some computer programming stuff around programming, but this is the key line. These skills are by no means unique to computer programming. The techniques we teach and draw upon are common to all of engineering design. We control complexity by building abstractions that hide details when appropriate. We control complexity by establishing conventional interfaces that enable us to construct systems by combining standard, well-understood pieces. We control complexity by establishing a new language for describing a design, each of which emphasizes particular aspects of design and de-emphasize others. Underlying our approach to this subject is our conviction that quote unquote computer science is not a science, that its significance has little to do with computers. The computer revolution is a revolution in the way we think and the way we express what we think. All right, so that's interesting, like, right? The author here is saying that, look, this isn't We're not typing some stuff into a computer. We've got like a new way to think. And like, what do? We create abstractions, right? So that we can handle a ton of stuff, right? This is the whole point of my talk, is that we're going to do this, and I'm going to show you how I do it. The individual stuff I show you does not matter that much. I think some of it's pretty good. I think some of it's pretty cool. I don't think it matters that much. I don't want to get hung up on that, right? So I think this is like a really pretty abstract thinking, pretty sophisticated group. I think most people be like, oh, what's this tool? How do I use this tool? No, I mean, yes, maybe some tools are better than other tools, but there's a mode of thinking that when you recognize it just kind of permeates the world. You're either controlling complexity or not. You need abstractions to control complexity, operations, a bunch of actions happening in the world over time. If we can get the underlying piece of it, you can see how I do it, but I really want to just get you seeing that. This is maybe old hat. If you're advanced, you probably already do this a lot. But being able to see how you can use that to control your actions and your behavior, how you can coordinate with other people and such and so forth. All the examples are just examples to try to demonstrate the underlying approach and method, which I think is a really key thing from going from an individual performer that's got some habits on lockdown to being able to really thrive and take it to top level when you want to individually, and then coordinate and work with other people. So hopefully you either like Persians and fighting Greeks or computer programming. If you don't like either of those, I don't know what I have for you. I guess I could show you some stuff. And that's the gist of it. Peter, are we on the same page? Is this working for you?
Yeah, sounds great. I'm excited to hear it.
Okay, rock and roll. So once again, I'm going to underline this. You know, if I was talking to a less abstract thinking, less, conceptualizing, diving deeper in the mechanics things, I probably wouldn't do this talk, right? I probably wouldn't do this talk because people want like, give me the details, right? Because there's nothing wrong with being an amateur. Amateur means you just do it for the love of it, right? Right? That's totally fine. And for those people, it's like, oh, what's this tool? What kind of cool thing can I do about it? Not like, where does this fit in how I think and navigate the world, right? So yeah, I'm just gonna then just jump into some examples. And here's the personal ones I'm gonna show you. I've done a bunch of stuff like this. I'm trying to demonstrate a method and way of thinking. I think the individual things are cool, but I'm trying to demonstrate a method and a way of thinking as opposed to the individual stuff, which is cool. And the first ones I'm gonna look at are the personal ones and how I got good at this personally. So I'm gonna show you habits, time, an example on mood, and calories, food, because the ability to coordinate these elements using abstractions is possible with everything. Pardon me if I sound like a total computer nerd. I suppose I might be one sometimes. But so I'll show you a couple of the tools that I built. And all of these, it doesn't really matter what they're in. This is in Excel. You could do this in Google Sheets. You could do this in Airtable. You could do this in Notion. It doesn't really matter. So this is what I call light spreadsheet. This is what I call light spreadsheet. And it's pretty simple. You put stuff on there that you want to do, like morning routine, right? And you mark it green on the days you did it. You mark it red on the days you didn't do it. I have another category called half. Mine's a little more complicated. I'm showing you a more complicated version. The simple version is way simpler than this, right? But just to give you the gist of it. So, hey, I want to do my morning routine every morning. I want to brush my teeth and make my bed and whatever. I mark it green when I do it. I want to write a little journal entry. I mark it green when I do it. I mark it red when I don't do it, right? So what I have here is a winnable game. So you see there's 35 elements on here. It's not exactly 35. There's some blank lines, right? At the end of the day, I want to review the day. Just a couple of questions that were like, hey, what went well today? What would I do differently, right? And if I just type the answers to those, then I mark it green. Pretty simple. So what I've done here, hopefully, is I've set up a winnable game for myself that both helps me on the day whenever I don't know what to do. I could just pull this up first thing in the morning. This works great for some people, not for everybody, but it's pretty cool. Right? And I could just like do it. This was a crazy month where I was trying to, it's kind of like an experiment. I was trying to work 12 focused hours every single day. I hit it 80 something percent days, 83, I think, across the whole month. So like, okay, that's crazy. Don't do that. Don't start there. Okay. But like, okay, we were using Slack for chat at that point. I said once a day, I want to get on Slack. If I just get on Slack and just send one message to somebody, I read one message and reply. I'm like a bad chatter. I'm getting better at it. Right. And you can see some things like I like update tasks, never got whatever. The other nice thing about this is if something's bad, I can see exactly why, right? So I could just go across and I can just slowly work on it. So you see like doing growth and revenue activities around that period, like was kind of happening, then it was happening, then it wasn't happening, but then I got on top of it. So I just turned things from red to green over time. It's a great way to get stability and control over one's life. And if things are going bad, you could see why. Now I was sleeping pretty well that month, but this taught me over time that if I sleep bad 3 nights in a row, if these are red, I mark those in the morning. It's the only one I do the next morning. If sleep well, nothing bad happens if I have one bad night of sleep. nothing very bad happens if I have 2 bad nights of sleep. If I go 3, then it's like a shark attack on the rest of it. I won't do all of my other habits. So like, this sounds stupid, but like a lot of people don't know this or don't have anything like this. Furthermore, whenever I have a good month, this is like whatever, a year and a half ago, I can like pull this up and be like, okay, this is exactly what I did. And here's the rates that I hit them, right? At the end of the week, I just debrief it, how'd it go? Make commentary. Like, okay, I was using some miscellaneous internet. Okay, let me get that down, right? No miscellaneous internet's on here. Now, there's some technical details. You can have statuses on here, like all team aligned. You can have do not do stuff, like do not use the internet. You can have things you do that are action. I've written some stuff up about this. If we want to follow up later and you want some of the stuff that's public, we can do that. I'm really just trying to demonstrate the method. It's not the tool, it's the method, all right? Okay, this will look hardcore. I did this because I was trying to squeeze every last drop out of life. You might not want to do this. That's totally fine. I tracked my time down to the 5-minute block. I put them into what category they're in. I had a little like, was this good or not? And like, what ratios of time did I spend on, right? So how much time did I spend on excellent? And then what percentage of my day was on excellent work? And like what percentage was on excellent and leisure? I don't recommend most people do this. I'm like a nerd, analytical. I love numbers. I think they're beautiful. I think this is totally overkill. The simplest version, people see this, they're like, oh my gosh, hey, don't get overwhelmed by this. It's just like where's your time go? Well, there's like a way to figure it out. Just like write down where it went. But the simplest version of this is to define what's your most important work, right? You just get to define it. You get to pick in your life. And then write down the start time when you start and the end time when you end. That's how I recommend everybody start. Do it in a text file. I'd start in a text file. I always do some text. And then I port this over. Because I now know what I'm doing, I got a format of it. I've put some of this online on how to do it. It takes like 5 or 10 minutes a day. And I periodically, I'm like, oh, sometimes I like start to read a good fiction book and then I read all day for the rest of the day and I don't stop. Like I like reading, but I don't like doing 9 hours of reading in a row from 3 p.m. to midnight. So I should be careful of when I start reading a fiction book. I just started reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I never read it before. And I could see why I would just keep reading it. I'm so busy I can't, but like I could see why this would be dangerous at different periods of my life. So I can see what time's going into. I can see like, oh, okay, hey, look, I'm not doing any health and fitness. Let me pick that up and put 30 minutes in, whatever, right? So like I can just kind of see where all my time is going. Again, the simplest version. I don't recommend when anyone starts, by the way, little tactical advice. I'm going to try to stay on the operational level, but be a little tactical. I don't recommend anybody starts with trying to minimize bad stuff. Just try to increase the good stuff. Because you have 168 hours, that will necessarily push something else out of your life. Right? So simplest version of this is pretty simple. You can do it for a week or two to learn about yourself. What was the start time and the end time of whatever you define as most important, whether that's your PhD thesis or programming on an application or whatever. And then like one thing, don't like call 7 things all the best, most important thing, because it's can't do that, right? Okay. How do I figure out like what I'm eating and like what my calories are when I want to lose some weight? I was a little chubby. I want to get a little less chubby. I just wrote down all the food I ate. And then I had some calories. Most of these are just like copy pasted. I'm a spreadsheet geek. I like doing this by hand. You could also use an app, MyFitnessPal, whatever, to make it easier. But like I just write down everything I ate and then what the calories were. And then for me, because this worked for me, I didn't care about hitting daily calorie goals at this point in time. I had one day at 1,100. I just wasn't that hungry that day. I have another day at 2,800. As long as it averaged at the end of the week, right? As long as it averaged at the end of the week, I broke this down in a different spreadsheet and I did analysis. As long as the end of the week was correct, that I was good. Right? So like, hey, what am I doing? I'm just like recording what I want to do. And then what's true, I'm like creating some numbers around it. I'm looking at it. Then I have a weekly review. I think David Allen might have talked about that on his talk. It's in his book. So it's an essential thing. So weekly's about the right level. For me, I start my week on Sunday, do a weekly review first thing every Sunday morning. I say, hey, I like how I ate last week. I don't beat myself up. If I don't like how I ate, I just make some adjustments. What went wrong? I had 3 milkshakes on the day. What had 3 milkshakes? I guess I shouldn't even have 1 milkshake. If I go to the milkshake place, I'm going to go off the rails, right? A little qualitative analysis there and so on. Because this was a high stress period, I did mood tracking. So at the start, middle, and end of the day, so you see start of the half. So these are broken into half days. I'm just like, what's my mood? I wrote this qualitatively. I started optimistic. By the middle of the day, I was tired. I was still tired at the start of the middle of the day. Sometimes I can nap between them. And then what was the end status? It was good. Did I give 80% of what I possibly could out of my best efforts? Yes or no? Started neutral, ended meh. Then I was strong, then I was exhausted, right? Then I add these up, right? So what you're doing is you're taking these like intangible things that people like don't have good memories around, right? Like what was your mood? What was your mood last Wednesday, 6 days ago? Like you probably don't know. Unless you had a really bad day or a euphoric day, you probably don't know. I know what my mood was a year and a half ago, you know, on the 28th of whatever month this was. Like I could tell you what my mood was. You know what I mean? So again, you can create structures. These are abstractions, right? The words optimistic doesn't mean anything, right? Doesn't like that doesn't mean anything. It's the fact that is like a reference to how I was actually feeling. And then like, okay, why? Okay, like I was hosting some time at the work gym. You mentioned that's one of the things we do over at Ultra Working. I had a good time at the work gym. We had some really good breaks in particular. I had fun hosting and working. Okay, cool. So I was like having a nice day, but I was then tired at the end of it. That's interesting. At the end of the week, I kind of just, okay. At the start of every half day, like I was in like a good mood 8 times, bad mood 3 times, neutral 3 times. At the end of the day is whatever. And then like when that starts to get worse, where, you know, like only had a good mood start of the day 4 times in the next week, and I was doing bad 6 times, I'm like, okay, I need a rest. See exhausted start showing up in here? Great. I got an early warning sign operationally that I'm breaking down and I need to take more leisure, right? So you could do things like this. They don't have to start like this. I've been doing this for years. I'm into it. I geek out on it. I read papers on it. Like I'm really into it, right? But you could do lightweight versions of this. And again, the simple versions might be very simple journal entry. I use spreadsheets a lot for things. It's totally fine. But there you go. So you see what we're trying to do here, and I can show you some more advanced team systems in a second. What we're trying to do here is I'm trying to operationally, right? I'm trying to put some operational control on all these tactics that I want to do and all this information that I need, right? Pretty simple. Takes like 5 minutes here and there. And there's other ways to do it. You can have an app that polls you. If you're in a committed relationship, maybe you have a text where you send to your partner if they're also an analytical nerd, that like, hey, here's our mood at the start of the day. And then you look at it together on the weekend. Like, how could we have had better days? There's a lot of ways to say, hey, if I want my mood to be up, there's like a bunch of things that could do that, right? I should get some data on what my mood actually was. And I should look at what moved it. I should write down a little bit why my mood was the way it was. I should look at that once a week and just make some tweaks going ahead to the week. So it's actually as complex as it seems. And this is complex to learn and to get started with. By getting started there, right? And starting much smaller than that, you're getting a way to kind of control the shape of your life, not with the local actions, but to coordinate all of them over time operationally. So strategy, I'm going to do a goal setting thing. I'm going to have one pretty ambitious goal each week. Every project will conclude every week. If I don't complete it by the end of the week, I'll throw the project away entirely. I'll just call it failed and I'll start the next project, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to do one website or app or something each week to learn them. Okay, that's a strategy. Tactic, I'll wake up, I'll open my, I won't turn on the internet right away. I'll draw on paper before I do any interface design, whatever. That's a tactic. How do you actually know what's happening? That's the operational layer. It kind of creates some abstractions to kind of learn how it works. And that's how to coordinate yourself over time. So that's my personal take. There's a question in chat, and we'll take Q&A at the end, I think. But you said, wow, if this is the daily and weekly, I wonder what the year-end review looks like. Actually, as I go to larger timeframes, it gets more qualitative and less technical. That's just kind of like, hey, how's it going? And then I just use intuition to answer it, right? So I'll actually put a lot of control on a day or the foods that I eat. But then like, hey, okay, do I want to like lean out and be doing more endurance sports this upcoming year? Or do I want to put on some muscle mass and do some weightlifting? This is like a much more, what do I want my body composition to be? I don't know, I could do this or that. It gets much more qualitative and actually very loose and light. I will go back and look at the data, obviously, but I don't need to. I think a lot of people get obsessed with the data, but it's kind of like, you get it, you kind of get a sense of what's going on. And then you're like, all right, so what do I want? You know what I mean? I'm not married to this. Like something could strongly say that X is predictive. And I could be like, you know what, but I don't care. I'm going to like do Y anyways, because that's what I want. Right. So like, I'm okay with that. It's just to inform me and to help me put a control over things. So that's a quick take on some of the ones I use personally. This was built up over time. You're seeing systems that were like 5 years mature with practice, by somebody that geeks out on this and obsesses over it. What I'm really trying to show you is that you can create these structures for like, how do days fit together? And how do the pieces of my day fit together? And how does the food that I eat at a given time of day have a certain amount of calories that piece together to what I had in that day? And then how do the days piece together to what I had that week, which will then turn into whether I'm gaining muscle mass or losing muscle mass, whether I'm gaining fat mass or losing fat mass, the mood. Okay, here's a snapshot of my mood 3 times a day, right? And a little description of why. How does that fit together into feeling the way I want to feel? What should I do a little bit differently next week? Look at this all in the weekly review. It's pretty fast, an hour or two, right? And that's the gist of it on a personal level. Cool. Are we, Peter, how are we doing? I could do some team stuff as well, a little quick overview of that, and then take some questions. Any other questions? Want to jump in mid-route and discuss and dialogue a little more?
I think that was awesome, first of all, and I do feel like a bubbling up to ask questions. But is that team portion like around 10 minutes? You think?
We'll do the fast version, so nobody gets to hate on me though. So we're doing the fast version so we can take some questions. There's a lot of things that are worth doing in life, and you always got to be mindful that everything happens in time. Let's go really fast then through the team side of things. And hey, before I flip on screen share, let me just tell you some of the things I think about as an executive, right? We're 100% remote because of COVID. We had an awesome office. Now we don't anymore. Got a pretty good team. We got people with different backgrounds from different cultures. We're all in different time zones, like around the world. Most people went back to their home countries. It's like awful. So I realized one day, this is not obvious. The realizing things that aren't obvious is hard. That like, hey, when I used to be in the office, I could like notice if somebody like bags under their eyes or they look spaced out, and I'd be like, yo, what's going on? You all right? You want to go like take a walk, get a smoothie? Like, what are you grinding on? This looks like it sucks. Do you want to go to the gym together? Like I could just like be cool and take care of people that were reporting to me or were just on the team. Even if they were like reporting to somebody else on the team, I could be like, hey, how you doing? I didn't have that anymore. And I realized that like, I have no idea how Xavier's life is going. I have no idea how Luca's life is going. I really just don't know. Right. And so I thought about it and said like, okay, what are the details here that we want? So we want everybody to be having a nice time and having a good life. I want some insight into how their life is going. Them telling me how their life is going in a way that's not useful to them would be a pain in the neck. So I kind of load up these different considerations that I want, and then I play around with the design and the tools. This is very much a skill set that you develop over time, right? So from the basic stuff of how do I deal with my own mood, right? That lets me then have some tools. I built some skill in that. I found, because I've done a little experiments on different spreadsheet tabs. A lot of them don't work. I would say only about like 10% of them work well enough that I want to do them forever. So if I do one of them a month, in a year, I'll get one new tool. If you get a tool for like controlling your mood or your food intake or your exercise, like once a year, a new one, like you get pretty effective over the course of a decade. And if you do 2 or 3 little experiments in a month, then you get like a whole big bag of tools and methods, right? So I'm thinking about this. I was also thinking about, okay, so we want the team to be thriving. We also want them to be like, you know, on a company level, you want people to be well utilized. You want people to be doing stuff that matters, that produces business results. Otherwise, we'll go out of business, right? We're a cool company. We're trying to do some stuff to change the world. We need to like succeed. Like we need to ship things. We need to do stuff, right? And it needs to be the right stuff. They need to be aligned, right? So I'm like, okay. Well, what if we call this team alignment, utilization, and thriving? TAUT. It's also an English word, right? It's an acronym, but it's also an English word. So we created just that. So I'll show you what that looks like. Some of this is WIP, but it's work in progress, but it's working pretty well. So what we have, and I'll only show mine because these are private. So we're pretty open book and transparent about a lot of things. But if anybody in the team could see people's thriving levels, then somebody won't click, I'm afraid of this thing, or they'll be less likely to, right? So this just goes to me and Lee Knowlton, our CTO. We're the only people that can see everybody. I can show you mine now, right? So at the start of the day, and this is like, hey, you have to do this or like you can't work here, right? Like this is like, hey, we're swinging a hammer on this one. This is coercive authorities being used. You will fill this out, right? But at the start of the day, hey, what's your mood when you woke up? What's your alertness level? What's your clarity of the work? Are you having fun? How's your morale? How's your momentum? And you just click them, right? It's like kind of fun. It's colorful. We use Notion, doesn't matter. It could be a shared spreadsheet, could be anything. Are you exercising lately? Oh, I was, and then I wasn't. How's your nutrition? Some problems very good. Have you slept well? Our team are like analytical nerd geeks, whatever. They like stuff like this. Like, oh my gosh, like I have to report as to whether I'm sleeping well. Yeah, because I want you to be healthy and happy and stuff. And like also everybody on our team's into stuff like this. So I don't think it's working in any company, right? But it works for us. So you can see like, hey, I was crushing it around here, then I wasn't. And then I'm like, oh, Lee, wow, right? So Lee has a snapshot of how I'm doing. I have a snapshot of how he's doing. We both have a snapshot of how everybody else is doing. So we can help people. I'm like, hey man, you're not sleeping so well lately. Yeah, man, there's just a construction outside. Have you tried earplugs? No, I haven't. Hey, try this brand. Do you know what I mean? So it's just kind of like sometimes people just put up with stuff, right? So we like help. Then at the end of the day, you fill out, hey, what's your starting state? What's your ending state? I wish it was a more heroic one. This was like actually just yesterday, right? I had a lot of unfocused miscellany yesterday. So it's the starting state, like what are you working on at the company? And I was adrift at sea at the start of the end of the day, adrift at sea at the end of the day, right? But like, okay, whatever. And then, but is in general your project a good project? Did you work on your primary project? Are you doing well? I hate that my last entry is bad, but okay, I guess it makes me seem human, so that's nice. If you're blocked, if you mark that you're blocked, this will actually show up in different views that Lee and I have. Hey, what's your hype level? Okay, if you're like super analytical, that's not a very precise thing. It's like, yeah, okay, it's like a qualitative 1 to 5 ranking on a logarithmic basis as to the amount of subjective, okay, whatever, right? So are you hyped? Are you scared of anything? And then what's the next step? So in one snapshot here, and I have this for all of our team members, I could see, hey, how's your mood? How's your alertness? How's you know, your clarity, are you having fun lately? You exercising, you're working out, you sleeping well? Then like, what were you at the start of the day? What's your single biggest project right now? Is it a good project? Mark no if it's not, right? Like mark no if it's not. If you hate what you're doing, please mark that you're anti-hyped and you hate your project. So like, this is a way for people to tell us that, right? If you're scared, oh, this is scary, I'm not ready to ship this, what if I screw something up? Let us know, right? And so I get this view, right? We built all of this into a couple of things. So this is the executive factory zone, that's the civilization tech tree, right? So you start with like, you know, you start with the wheel, and then you get like pottery, and you get writing from there, and there's mathematics, and then you get currency down at the bottom, right? So it's a little civ tech tree of the image. We have our executive meetings here. These are private, so we could talk about, actually these could probably be public. They're usually not very sensitive, but sometimes we got to talk about how something's going. Then we have all of our team meetings. Anything that I'm tagged on shows up in this view in Notion. Notion's a cool tool, but you could use a lot of different things, right? But so I just have a view of everything I need to work on in a single day, right? So I see in Tot how everybody's doing, how's their mood, how's everybody sleeping and stuff, right? I got the meetings that Lee and I have, and then here's the meetings of everybody on the team that are relevant, filtered to the next couple of days that I'm gonna be in, and we have like types of them, right? Pretty cool. And where that comes from is we built a little thing called the target determination system. There's not much going on because we're always clearing this, but here is, we call this the target determination system, right? We called this the target determination system because we started to work on better project management, which I feel like a lot of people have tried and failed to do, right? Like everybody tries to do better project management, it still sucks forever. And we realized eventually that the problem is not in managing projects, it's in the project selection for us. Like if we choose a half-baked project or don't flesh it out well or don't clarify the scope, then it's like, then we can't manage it well because we don't know what the heck we're doing. So the first thing we do is a brainstorm, call that recon, like reconnaissance. And then everybody on the team writes a pitch, right? It's like a mix of a scope and a persuasive case as to why it does it. It takes like a half day or a day. Oh my gosh, that's going to slow things down a lot. But we actually give people a ton of autonomy. They can kind of work on whatever they want, as long as they make a good case for it. Then we work on that together. We approve it or we don't. Then it gets added to the board. That's our project management area. At the end of it, we write what's called an after action report. I could show you a couple of these. So, you know, like, hey, we're going to do like, make a Linux version of our desktop software, right? So Saad wrote a pitch and he's like, okay, like who is this for? Please give me the customer's goals and details, who will benefit from this, right? And like, why will it be better? And like, okay, some of this is like not filled out. I'll go get angry later. That's okay, right? And like some of this is a little too corporate and whatever, but like we're working on it and we're getting better as a team, all right? And so, you know, we think through scope and things like that, right? Then once we actually work on them, there's like project files, and afterwards there's like an after action report. So we learn from everything. I feel like most companies are, oh, we're into learning. I'm like, well, but like you spend no time on it. Like, how can you say your company's committed to learning when nobody spends any time learning? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So, you know, like Luca did a feature for our mobile app. You could see all of our meetings get attached to this. We have standard meeting agenda templates. Okay, hey, let's zoom out. Wow, Sebastian's showing a lot of information. Hey, there's like a stage of thinking about stuff before we do stuff. We call that recon. There's a standard way to do it, to brainstorm. From there, you pull out the best elements and you write up, here's what I want to do and why. We do that diligently before projects, so they're well chosen, so then people can just do whatever the heck they want. Then we do the stuff. Afterwards, we write up what we learned. In the process of it, there's meetings, right? We write an agenda for every meeting to control the meeting, get the most out of it. There should be a primary objective for every meeting, and there also should be learning and fun, right? So, you know, to give you an idea of this, right? I can just show you one of our meetings. Let's see, which one was the really interesting one? And it's probably this one, right? So this one is, we have it's not that one. So this one is, we have a service called Clockwork Nutrition. Somebody can sign up. I think it's $280 a week, where we automate 100% of people's meals coming to them, right? Like we like use algorithms. You tell us what you want, your body composition stuff, and we just like send 100% of the meals that show up via delivery service, perfect macros, perfect nutrition. Super complicated. We're using like genetic algorithms. We want to be responsive to feedback if somebody's mood or energy is getting lower. Then we like adjust calories and send messages and whatever. And we saw, okay, sometimes people are like, oh man, I'm about to eat something, right? Keep clicking on the wrong one. I'm about to eat something, I'm getting worried, or I already ate something, I'm going to binge, right? So we created this thing for the mobile app, right? We created this thing for the mobile app that like has like prompts that people walk through of like, hey, I'm about to eat some stuff. You click a button, it's like, hold on, don't do it. We actually like make back-end adjustments, how many calories they get the next day. We send them an email of like, hey, reply if you need some stuff. And then we try to have some humor in it, right? And so like we polished this up and like we like looked at different options and stuff, right? And then like Luca went, everybody on the team's empowered to go share their work with people. So like Luca says, hey, I want to reach out to this Nobel Prize winning economist that was an influence on me. I'm like, okay, cool. So like I edited the email and like he wrote to the guy that won the Nobel Prize and like the guy writes back, I was like, hey, this is cool. So like, that's nice, right? And then that all shows up kind of in the after action report here. I'm gonna do 2 more things very, very quickly. I'll do 3 things, but I'll do one of them really fast, which is I think learning is really important. I think a lot of companies don't invest in it. So there's 2 things we do. There's 2 things we do for learning on an operational level, right? So like what's learning, right? Like learning is like having some sort of theory and then like practicing it and developing it over time, making it memorable, making it interesting, making it not boring. I think making things not boring has some operational, tactical and operational skill in it. So our weekly all hands is called the Arena. And we together, Lee, we made a document, how to drive Lee Knowlton, that's our CTO, crazy in meetings, right? It has come to my attention that while most people think they know how to run a good meeting, they are not prepared with all the relevant skills and mental models to run an absolutely terrible meeting that will drive me crazy. So without further ado, I thought I would write the definitive guide on how to do a meeting that will drive me absolutely bonkers. You can use any and all of the following techniques when you want to have a terrible meeting with me that will result in one or both of us being highly bored and or tearing our hair out. Let's start with an essential skill to driving each other crazy: how to write an absolutely terrible agenda. Right? No preparation for double the insanity. Share the agenda as late as possible. Do not establish a clear and useful primary objective. And like, some of this is like kind of funny, right? Leave a lot of key details out. For extra bonus points, you can have sentences that start with a very important thought, which then, right? So we're just kind of like, okay, right? And like, there's kind of some funny stuff in here. It's kind of like, hey, your meeting should never be get feedback on X. Look, you can't stop Lee and Sebastian from giving you feedback. If we're having a meeting about something, you're going to get feedback. You could write as an objective, try to not get Sebastian to talk and you'd probably fail. I'm going to give you feedback. No, like, what do we want? Like, do we need to make some decision? Do we need to explore this? Do you need some data? Do you need to be taught something? You want to learn something? You know, you got some crazy idea and you want to explore it and see if you could turn it into a scope. Like, what are we doing? Like, right, we're not getting feedback. Like, this is useless, right? So we go through this and like teach that. I'll go very fast through the rest of this. I also wrote up some basic skills that go into business. We do some formal training on it. So like teach people to use logic and like why it applies in business, right? Because like people don't know how to do this. So this is like an and, so A and B are true, and only if A and B are true, right? So like, let's say we're thinking of coding an integration between Clockwork Nutrition, the meal service, and a Garmin watch. If you ran a lot, we'll send you more calories. That's only useful to people if they're interested in Clockwork Nutrition and own or will like buy very soon a Garmin watch. So you can like use this to reason. That's very basic, but there's other things like that's an and, that's not A or not B makes it true, right? So let's say we coded a feature for Headquarters, our desktop app, does a bunch of different stuff to help you run your life. Let's say that we coded a feature that was like an ebook reader note taker thing. Well, maybe the people that are interested in that are like people that don't have an ebook reader or note taker they like. They like their ebook reader, like they like their Kindle, but they don't have a note-taking system, they might give it a try. Maybe they like their note-taking system, but don't like their reader, they give it a try, but if they like both of them, they won't give it a try. Right? So you can just use logic to reason through who would use this thing. You know, we talk about like statistical distributions. Do we think things are like normally distributed, bimodally distributed? And then we like build this into what we do. So I could go forever. One last one. We built a little process center and we thought about like, what is a job? This is probably a very, very interesting one to end on before getting into questions. What is a job? I'm pretty sure a job is a collection of processes and projects only. There's processes, which is stuff you're going to do a lot. There's projects, which is stuff you're going to do with a definitive end date. There's also like stupid ad hoc stuff that we haven't thought well about that just shows up. Some of that's unavoidable, but the greater percentage of that is your life, the more your life sucks. So I was thinking about this of like, why is your title like backend engineer? You should be able to like do whatever the heck you should use your skill and affinity the most, but like maybe you do a little front end on this thing. That's totally fine. Like this is stupid how people think about titles. There's processes, you're in charge of them, right? Somebody is in charge of making sure we're updating to be compliant with Visa and MasterCard on Stripe on their payments rules, right? You are as the guy that's running the back end, right? The chief guy on that, right? But that doesn't mean you only do that, right? So you just handle your processes and then do projects. Projects are things that make new things. that have a definitive end date. That's it. Stupid ad hoc stuff shows up, like get a bizarre email, or if we get a DDoS attack and there's no process around it, we just have to deal with it or whatever, get Cloudflare going. But, you know, like, yeah, that's most jobs. So like we just built this out, and these all show like, hey, who runs the process and owns it? When's the last time it ran? There's a little thing, you just click this thing whenever it happens. What do you mean payroll's behind? I've totally done payroll. Why does this say it's behind? There you go. So now it goes to healthy. See, you just got a demo, right? I'm totally not behind on payroll, for the record, right? I don't know why Lee, or probably because I didn't click it on the board, but this is new. Anyways, whatever. That's me. It's a payroll. Okay, whatever. So there you go. So like we could see, hey, who owns these things, but who needs to be involved? If we have a standard operating procedure, we don't for a lot of these. We can link them, right? And so what we're trying to do to wrap up and get into Q&A is we're trying to look at how these different elements fit together and control them. I don't know how my team is doing because I'm not in the office anymore. So they fill out something at the start of the day that's useful to them. It's fun to fill out that they can calibrate about. That shows up in a filtered view on Notion for me. Me and Lee talk about that. We say like, hey, like how's Xavier doing? So-and-so, if so-and-so didn't sleep well or isn't eating well, let's have a chat with them and see if it's good. Hey, somebody says they're scared. Let's like have a talk and like do some training and stuff, right? Have some formal training, have some informal training, have some templates. And this is all about how to coordinate it over time. Likewise with processes, likewise with, you know, hey, here's how to run a bad meeting. So like, how do we make it funny? What are the challenges, you know, in the unique domain? How do we make it memorable? How do we get people to do it? Then when somebody writes a bad meeting agenda, we're like, oh, there's a joke in there at the very bottom about cat food. Like the joke cat food shows up a few times. So now we have a little metaphor of like, oh, this is like a cat food agenda, right? You know what I mean? There's jokes in there and there's like images and stuff and like whatever, right? But like, so it just gives us a way to like over time, really skill up at communicating, because people think that like writing an agenda is some like stupid stuff that they do, right? Like I'm just typing some things in. No, it's like you're thinking. It's the quality of your thinking to interface with another person, right? So we spend time on these like fundamental things. Yeah, that's a quick take on how I do things. Last thing that I'll say before we take questions and dialogue is like none of the individual pieces matter. It's not Notion, it's not spreadsheets, it's not that we call it a target termination system or TOT. I think some of these are nice, this is what we do, but it's this mode of thinking of like, how do I abstract away and what do I need? Like I need a view of how things are going on the day. I need some subjective elements of decision-making. I need certain actions to happen. I need certain people to get updated in a clear and concise way. How do I make that happen is what I call operations, operational skills of coordinating all the tactics and all the resources over time. And you could start in your own personal life to have a better mood or whatever. I wouldn't do this with 18 things at the same time. If you're new to it, I do it with like one, right? And I take it very, very seriously. You have to pay a lot of attention to things when they're new. When it's like a little baby plant that can die, when it's a big, powerful tree, you don't need to like take care of it every day. But when it's a little baby plant, you'd be very nice to it. So like one thing, and like with a lot of emphasis when you're not busy and you're really excited about it, is the right way. You learn this, you get the personal effectiveness on the ops and systems type stuff a little bit leveled up. Then you can start doing it for groups of people. You can do it with a romantic partner or roommates or housemates or classmates or colleagues. And of course, if you're managing or leading teams, absolutely can start on the personal level with little things like how's my food, how's my mood, how's my sleep, how's my learning, how's my writing, how's my working, how's my habits, whatever. That can turn into this kind of operational skill for groups and teams. I'm done. All right, let's party. Let's hang out. Let's take questions.
Very cool. I can see a lot of minds blown in the Zoom room. We only have 15 minutes, so start throwing your question in the chat. We'll maybe field one or two. I have a question to warm you up, Sebastian. So for someone just a beginner, circling back to the personal one, there's a buzzword here in the STOA, the ecology of practices, like the ecology of practices you have, whether meditation, your diet. How do you source, you personally, or do you have a process or system for it to source what practices you have in your system? Like how do you choose? And how would you recommend from someone who's just starting the system, how do they choose? And the other thing, the question I'll tag onto it, which is probably related, is do you have a philosophy as a way of life that maybe has like a superordinate goal that integrates or is related to these systems that you have?
I do. To the level, those are two questions at very different levels of abstraction and intensity. To the first one, well, I can only speak to what I actually did, right? Of how it actually happened definitively. Right? That's what I did, which is I was in Toronto. I had just finished in the nonprofit education world. We went and spoke at a bunch of universities, really great events. People said they were really great, but we did like 17 of them in 30 days. It's grueling. I was totally burned out and exhausted. And I'm like, wow, I got to like get healthy and be right. So I just did like a brainstorm on a piece of paper of like, what should I be doing each day to be healthy and well? I just did a little qualitative brainstorm. Like I should take a walk. I should read a book. I should do a little bit of work, you know, whatever, stuff like that, right? And then I was looking at that, I'm like, which of these can I do? I can't do all 13 of these every day. But I looked at it, I'm like, actually, this doesn't take very long. If I want to do all 13 of these every day, prepare for the next day, start the day with a morning routine, get a little fitness, take a walk, whatever, right? Right? And I was a daily meditator, by the way, for multiple years in a row. I did at least 10 minutes a day and sometimes more for like years. Then one day I was like, yeah, I think I'm done. I think that was good, right? And then I stopped, right? But yeah, so I have my daily stuff. And I'm like, man, this would be a good list. If I did all this stuff, I'd be healthy really fast. I'd be happy really fast. How the heck do I get myself to do it? I thought about it. And like, I'm like, how do I coordinate all these 13? They're tiny, some of them. Drink a glass of water at the start of the day. How do I actually make myself do that? Okay, I'm gonna look at this one thing, this spreadsheet, and I'm gonna put stuff on here that I wanna do. After you do this for like a little while, you get a stable list of stuff you always wanna do. Periodically, I try to take something off and see if my life gets worse. If it gets worse, I add it back in, right? I usually test 1 or 2 new things every month. And I recommend if somebody starts this, lights specifically, you'd only do like really no more than 15, 10 is pretty good. And then I think it tops out around 30, 35. Like I don't know anybody that can handle that much. Like at some point, just the data entry gets onerous. So you start at 10, over time you can slowly build up to like 30 at the most, and then it breaks. And then you just add and subtract. What you want is very situational. So if you're a PhD candidate or a research professor or an endurance athlete or a collegiate athlete, or you're just traveling at this period in your life and you're exploring and you're reading and learning, very different practices. So I think it's an incredibly personal and situational question. If we had an hour, we could get into that too. As for my overarching life philosophy, yeah, I think it can be a little bit, it risks being pretentious, but it's a philosophy crowd, so I can give it. I have something I actually call, it's one of the few things I've named after myself because it's my core principle. I call it Marshall's tautology, which goes something like this, just like grant for a second that there's no intelligent life off of Earth. Maybe there is, but just simplify for me. We could bring it back in later. It's it. All the intelligent life in the universe is on Earth. And then grant for a second that there's no single deity that gives a divine order and a divine plan, and that if they do, you just follow it, then you've done what matters, right? Just grant it, whatever true, you know, whatever. We could explore if that was true. It's a more complex version, but just there's no single divine plan. You just run the rules and you've done your part of the job. Okay, those two aren't true. Well, then the question I ask people is there any morality at all? Is anything right and wrong? And some people like are edgy and they're like, no, man, you could do it. I'm like, okay, so why don't you just go punch somebody if you're into it? Well, you know, I might get arrested. I'm like, no, just like punch them in the back of the head and run. You won't get caught. They're like, no, it's wrong. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, you have morality even if you won't admit it, but fine, right? But fine. I'm not giving you a hard time if you're like, think there's no morality, and I just pointed out that you do think some things are wrong, which is morality, by the way, but whatever. Grant that there's any morality at all. I don't know necessarily what morality is correct. Like, is it better to like help your own child a little more if you're a doctor, or to stay at the hospital trying to treat people? I don't know. But if you grant that there's any morality at all, and there's no divine plan and no other life, if the sun goes solar, supernova, and the earth is destroyed and all life is destroyed, then I think there's no more moral value in the universe at all after that. I can build it up a little more slowly. I think if humanity goes extinct, there's no more morality anymore. So I think a prerequisite to all other forms of morality is the continued survival and thriving of intelligent and moral agents. I'm trying to do my part of the job. Survival and thriving type stuff. There's other morality over and on top of that, but I think it's a prerequisite in a Super Bowl. Because like, who cares if we like preserve the rainforest for like another month and then the sun goes nova and the rainforest will burn to ash? Like, does it really matter? You know what I mean? Like, who cares if, you know, somebody had like a really nice day and the sun goes nova? Some people are like very, very, very personal, experiential, Epicurean, hedonist in the individual moments of one's life. I don't have that one, obviously, right? As much. I'm not saying it's wrong. I don't. But yeah, I think ongoing survival and thriving is important. I think humans getting better and machines getting better are in a little bit of a race right now. So I'm on the human augmentation side. We use some machine learning, and I'm friends with a lot of people in that world. I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried about AI, like a lot worried about AI. So like, I want humans to get better really quickly, and the ability to sort and navigate complex data, do logical thought, abstract thought, do things that are game theoretically sound, be nice to each other, be effective in groups, have an elevated level of discourse. One of the reasons I like what you guys are doing, and I was really happy to participate and honored to be invited, is like an elevated level of discourse. Imagine the whole world was having this level of discourse and exploration all the time. It'd be a much nicer world. I'm doing my small part of trying to make humans more effective before the computers, which will get a lot more effective, make us increasingly obsolete. But if we're all operating at a much higher level before that happens, then yeah, well, that's my quick take on it. But that's some mix of pretentious or scary, so I usually don't say that.
That's good. That's good. I thought you had a philosophy of life, so that's why I wanted to ask. So we might only can squeeze in one or two questions because we have to end at the top of the hour. Oslam, you had a question.
I have a really short question, Marshall. I wonder, do you ever take a break? And if you did, how would you feel? Not being able to track the data and like not quantify and the loss, like the gapness of it. So just if you could talk to the control aspect.
Actually, yeah, that's a great question. I never actually put a control system in place without an end date and expiration on it. So I think a lot of people say I'm going to do this thing forever. I just put a reevaluate date, and some things get pushed out forever. Like, this is still good, I'll keep doing it. But I'm very comfortable ceasing to do anything I'm doing. And I schedule reevaluation dates, right? So if I do a fitness plan, right? Like I did endurance training 1 month and I did 51 hours of endurance training that month, which isn't that much, pretty low intensity, right? And at the end of the month, I was like, we got audio? Okay, yeah, all right, yeah, fair enough. At the end of the month, I was like, okay, I'm done with that, I'm good, right? So the implicit time horizon that I use for habits now, lights and habits, is about a month. The implicit timeline I use for time tracking is about a month. When I was earlier on this, it was 1 week, and I would make adjustments every week. And I'm also very willing to abandon things after 1 week. So actually the default is these things are always getting turned off unless I think they're really life affirming. So I think some people don't have off ramps. That could be quarterly, that could be annually. Now, like if you're a medical doctor running your medical practice and it's like going well and you're thriving and you like your team and you like your patients and whatever, you might not need an annually review, but even that could be valuable. Hey, why am I being a doctor? Am I actualizing my medical knowledge? So you just look at that once a year. Is this still correct? I believe David Allen's Horizons tie into that, but any sort of fitness thing, nutrition thing, habit thing, work thing, tracking thing, they all have reevaluate and feel no guilt around ending on dates when I start them.
And a bit tied to that, maybe like, what about chaos and planning for chaos when things just don't go the way that you want? Do you just work on scenarios and so forth, or spend any time on that?
With my habits, what I try to do is I target a 70% success rate on all my habits and my goals. Now there's some critical goals that you can't screw up, but I target 70. And here's why. First off, we know from psychology, blah, 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 failures hurt people more than successes feel good. Like I know the replication crisis, but that one seems pretty sound. It also just matches my experience, right? So I want 2 wins, more than 2 wins for every loss. That's 70%. I'm not saying 70 is the right number, maybe it's 80, maybe it's 60, right? But people that target 100% success rate, right, have 2 things going on. First off, to actually even try to hit that, you have to be way conservative. You have no idea what you're capable of if you want to target 100. Second, then there's the like, oh, I screwed up on my diet and I ate a cheesecake. And then the person just goes and eats all the cheesecake. They just don't stop eating cheesecake because they're 100% broken. They're imperfect. They're a fallen human, whatever. I target 70. If I'm successful more than 70% on my habits or projects, I either do more stuff or increase the difficulty and magnitude, right? If I'm less than 70, I make things easier. People are also not willing to do that, right? So you were like running 10 miles a day, you get back into it. You're like not doing it most days. You don't want to go run. I'll like de-increment that to like, cool. I'm going to run for like 5 minutes. I'm going to lace up my sneakers and go outside the house. If I hit that 7 days out of 7 or 14 days out of 14, 100%, okay, that's too easy. Let me go run for a mile, right? So that's how I calibrate to that, which should account for chaos to some extent. There's bigger, in general, how do we have a buffer and stability and good friends and health? And there's like there's multiple levels that could be answered on. But the 70% success rate just like lets things break. And I'm comfortable with that. I do occasionally I will take this extremely seriously and I will do 100% of days of meditation for this month, but I do that very sparingly and only for things that I think are incredibly important to do that on.
Very cool. We are approaching the top of the hour and I have to let the other speaker in. And I wanted to give you a chance, opportunity to kind of let people know where to find your work and maybe that spreadsheet. I have it. I don't know how I got it. I don't know if it's available on the website or something like that. Like how could they find these tools that you offer?
Yeah, there's a free copy of the spreadsheet at, I believe, ultraworking.com/lights if you want to play around with that. Yeah, feel free to go grab one there. That's pretty cool. Over at Ultraworking, we do some cool stuff. We'd be happy to tell you about it, and whatever else. And yeah, I'm a very slow and bad email correspondent, but if there's anything interesting here, if you're into the same stuff that I am, if you like computer history, computer programming and military history and industrial stuff and inventing and ops, shoot me an email. It might be like 3 weeks before I reply. Like, I don't hate you. That's just the type of person I am on email, partially because I tell people to email me, and then a lot of people do. It takes me a while to reply, so I don't hate you. But yeah, shoot me an email if there's any interesting things. If you wanna riff a little bit. Brief-ish emails are good. Long emails are like, I don't know what the heck's going on here, man. I got a lot of stuff going on, right? But yeah, feel free to shoot me a line if you want to grab lights. It's at that link. And yeah, this was a pleasure. Thank you for having me here. I hope that was useful. I'll just say it again, by the way. 2 points. One, it's not the tools, it's the mode of thinking. How do I coordinate all this stuff, right? These are all just demonstrations of an underlying pattern of thought. It took me years and years and years to learn, but it's getting easier all the time. There's better materials getting online. And second, you can start real small. I feel like a lot of people, like a little physical piece of paper printed out and taped next to your bed that you just check with a physical marker hanging on your wall of like, made bed, drank water. That's the start of being able to run like NASA Space Shuttle Apollo project stuff. I know it sounds stupid, but like literally in NASA, they got a bunch of stuff on physical clipboards that they check with a pen. So if you can learn that on the trivial stuff, it really scales up very well. It changes at different levels of complexity, but I wouldn't put that down if you're a really creative and brilliant person that maybe hasn't explored this area, because you can build a little bit of skill, but then you can do some really cool stuff with it, coordinating groups of people and doing some stuff. So don't be afraid to start small. And remember, you're not just looking for the checklist so your bed gets made, you're looking for a way to just like understand and kind of navigate reality and control actions and behavior and people's kind of, fulfillment and rewards and things getting done over time. It's pretty cool. Encourage you to check it out. Shoot me an email if you want, grab lights if you want. Peter and everyone, thank you for having me here. Awesome, thank you for the question. And yeah, this was a delight. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. As you can see, I think people loved it, and a lot for us to chew on here at the Stoa. And I love the hyper practicality of it because it kind of grounds some of the galaxy brain stuff that we've been exploring recently. So more Sebastian at the Stoa. We'd love to have you back, my friend. Next session is now with Piers Steele. Procrastination is a new normal. And he's going to look at procrastination through a trans-perspectival lens. So you can check that out on the link right there. That being said, everyone, thanks for coming to the session today.
I'm out. Hey, throw up a bat signal anytime. I got my Justice League hat on. Throw up a bat signal whenever you want me at the Stoa. I'm happy to come by. This is great.
Beautiful.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, brother.